Hello and welcome to episode 4 of the Global Networking Show. We're broadcasting in the earlier hours for Europe as one guest joins us from Asia for the first time. So it's happy Wednesday afternoon from here in Vancouver. It's happy Wednesday evening, I believe, from the States and the US. And happy Thursday morning from Hong Kong. So we truly are global today and broadcasting live across 2 days. I'm quite impressed with that. I'm joining you from my Vancouver hotel room, so you might just about see the last remnants of twilight in Vancouver behind my shoulder. I've been enjoying some North American hospitality at the Global Speakers Summit over the last few days.
You know, we hope that you've had the chance to check out the new Global Networking Show website since we launched just before our last show. If you haven't, after today's show, have a look at globalnetworkingshow.com. That's globalnetworkingshow.com, where you can catch up with past shows and resources from a number of our guests. Andy?
Now today, Ivan and I are delighted to welcome two guests who we know are both going to contribute to a fascinating discussion.
The first is Susan Roane. There are some people who are good friends even though you've never met them. Susan Roane is a longtime supporter of BNI and author of the classic bestseller How to Work a Room, which is celebrating its silver anniversary with a new updated edition due out December 31st. And Susan is one of those people. By the time we actually met face-to-face, real, live, we had been friends for over a decade. And relationships really are the essence of Susan's books, her philosophy, and the presentations that she gives worldwide for companies like Coca-Cola, Kraft, PA Consulting, Chase Bank, Deloitte, University of Chicago, Intel, Apple. Whether you're an entrepreneur or work in a corporate setting, it's imperative to develop a network and nurture both professional and personal relationships, and Susan Roane is an expert at it. Andy?
And we're also being joined by Misner and Andy Lopata. Now, we met in a London private members club probably 2 or 3 years ago when Marianne eavesdropped on one of my conversations, and sort of after in a busy club after that meeting I said, I'll move for my next meeting if you like, and she said, no, I found your conversation fascinating, and we picked up from there. And since then we've become very good friends, and I'm delighted that Marianne has joined my mastermind group this year, which really is for me the inner circle, so someone I trust greatly. She's the author of the Financial Times Guide to Leadership, and Marianne splits her time between London and Hong Kong, and we've obviously caught her in Hong Kong in the run-up to Christmas. She's had a successful career in corporate life. She's worked for organisations such as Arthur Andersen, such as General Electric, Motorola, and then she became Global Chief Financial Officer for Shell Aviation. She now works internationally, focusing on leadership in emerging markets and emerging areas.
Don't forget, everyone, if you're joining us live, you can participate by asking questions and sharing your own experiences using the Twitter and Facebook hashtag GNetShow. That's GNetShow, or on the Google Hangout page. You can connect with us there as well. We'll do our best to get to as many questions during the show as we possibly can.
Now, before I introduce today's topic, as ever, we're broadcasting this live. It's new technology, and there's always 1 or 2 blips. So if you can only see Susan on screen, as I can, on the main screen, you're a very lucky person. It should be popping up with different faces as each of us talks. But I don't want to start playing with it in the middle of the broadcast. So bear with us, and hopefully we'll be able to clear that as we go through. If not, then you can both enjoy Susan's pearls of wisdom and also marvel at her reactions to what the rest of us say as we converse. And also, before we introduce Marianne and ask for a contribution, Marianne, your mute button is on, you may not be aware, so just if you can unclick that at the top of the screen, that'd be great. So our topic for today is networking both within and with corporates and large organizations. How can you develop an internal network if you work for a big business, and how can you build networks with people within such organizations?
Susan, many people working in large organizations prefer to keep their heads down and kind of get their job done effectively. Isn't that, here's our first question, Jay, isn't that really enough? Just put your head down and do your work, or is there more?
Well, there are a lot of people who think that, and the truth is if you put your head down and do your work, which is you do have to do that, but if you don't start talking to the people that do what you do in other departments and have an internal network and internal contacts and that what we call the informal grapevine, you are out of luck because you're going to need to have sources and resources within the company. A lot of people think, oh, I don't want to do that, I just have to do my job. I think we call them unemployed. You know, we really need to, for our own safety net, create people within our company and within our profession.
So unfortunately, we seem to have had another technical blip there. It's all happening already today. So Susan, we just missed the end of that. But let me go to Marianne while I hope that resolves itself. So Marianne, if you can unmute your mic. You were in you were global CFO. So people in the financial sides of organisations have two challenges, as I see it. You know, when we look at this question about keeping your heads down, the number one is perhaps people working in the financial field tend to be more introverted as a rule, and so aren't as comfortable reaching out and building networks and talking to people, find it a little bit more uncomfortable. And secondly, sometimes that they may find themselves perhaps seen at odds with other departments as they have to cut budgets and so on. So how do people cope with that and build networks, or are they better keeping their heads down?
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to say that if you want to be a great business finance person, you have to talk to people, because in finance, most of the time you're at the end of the chain and you rely on other people to give you information to be efficient at what you do. So going over the hump of being what you say, an introvert, I was a CFO, I don't think I can be defined as an introvert, is very important. How you get over the hump is really by trying to understand, okay, how are you going to be more efficient and how are you going to achieve your own success, and then try to find who it is you need to talk to be able to do that. So even in a finance organization, even in a finance function, networking, and it's not actually networking, it's getting to know the people that are going to help you do your job every day is very important.
So here we go. So next question, and this is for either of you. How can you get senior executives to recognize your efforts? Well, you know, we all want to network up, and if you're working in the workplace, you particularly want to connect with senior executives. How do you do that without it look like you're you know, brown nosing, kissing up?
Yeah, well, I think there's a huge part of it in the corporate culture. For instance, I had a great pleasure to work for two organizations, Shell and GE, where being connected was part of what you had to do to be seen as performing. In GE, they had this thing called PI, performance, image, and exposure, and they will push you through different leadership programs to buff up your network with very senior people in the organization. In Shell, they had an even more interesting system ingrained in the DNA of the company. They had what they call the get to know you. So inherently, everybody could schedule a get to know you with you at any level of the organization, where you could share what it is you were doing, what your thoughts were on the different part of the company, or what your thoughts were about what the person you were going to meet with was doing. And this really pushed you in front, allow you to be in front of very senior people. So I think, you know, look into the corporate culture of your company, look what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, and adjust to it.
So in that case, Marianne, okay, so I guess there's two questions that I have on that. The first one is that if you're in a company which has that culture, such as GE you talked about there, how much did the senior people really engage with it? How much did they buy into it? Was it a genuine interaction they had, or were they almost under duress? And the second question is, if you're in a company where you don't have that program, then what steps would you take? And maybe Susan will want to come in on that second question as well.
Yeah, from a G or Shell perspective, as I said, it's really part of the corporate culture. So people were very genuine with it, and they would never say no to meeting with you. Then it's not because you have the exposure that you have 100% hit rate. It's about as well preparing yourself for those type of meetings to make an impression. But me as a person, as an employee first, and then as a leader, I never felt it was not genuine.
Okay, good. And Susan, what about if you're in an organization where you don't have that type of structure?
You know, I just was at a University of Illinois event in the Silicon Valley, and one of the gentlemen who spoke, one of our alums, who is the Senior VP of Google X, and he talked about what Google does. So maybe there's some companies that still have that hierarchy where you can't get to people, but if you're looking at where things are really happening, company like Google, every Friday morning, they call it TGIF, but they now have it on Thursday so that they're in Asia could come. They actually have a call where everyone could get on, talk to everyone, up into and including Sergey, and people talked about what they did. What people find is sometimes the best ideas that companies have come from people in the absolute, you know, out there actually doing the job. If we only talk to managers and senior managers, we miss. I've been asked, as I'm sure Ivan has, as well as you, to speak to a number of companies that do executive leadership training because they want to get the next generation. They have to have people in the pipeline that people are expected to mentor. If a company doesn't have an in-house program, then you have to be your own advocate. And the truth is, you've got to get to know people. That means you accept invitations, you show up, you talk to people, and it can be daunting. But the idea is, this is your career. You want to, if you want to know what's going on, I'm going to tell you something. Everyone says absolutely talk to everyone above you. I'm going to make another suggestion. Be nice to other people that do maybe what you'd consider some of the less important jobs, because they have their networks, and that's important. Informal information that you might need, that you might get from the custodian or an administrative assistant, that'll help you make some decisions. To me, it seems that if there isn't something formal, you set it up and you show up.
To build on that, I think you're making an excellent point, Susan, is, you know, when you talk about being successful in a corporate environment, it's not only being noticed, it's about being efficient in your work, efficient and effective, and developing different type of network. At this level, for sure, to get noticed, but the level at your peers level, it's very important to have a very strong network and talk to your peers to understand what they're facing and create both an atmosphere of teamwork, but also a knowledge database. And it's also very important to talk to the level below you for several reasons, because the higher up you're going to go in the organization, the less in touch with the reality of the work you're going to be. And second of all, in this lower level, you might have the future talent. You might have the person who's going to really help you being more efficient in everything. So in an organization, it's not, communication and networking should not be upward. It should be at all levels. It should be like a bubble or a circle where you can get as many information for any operational, strategic, or just delivery issues you might face at one point of time.
I think there's an interesting point there, because I think it comes back to our whole definition of networking, because where it might have a negative connotation in a corporate structure could be where people are seen to be manipulating and trying to climb on others' shoulders to get higher in their career. And yet ultimately a stronger network is going to help you build your career. But if you look at networking as a collaboration tool, networking as a means of sharing, of learning, of picking up new ideas, you will be more, for want of a better word, holistic in the way you approach it. It won't be just about speaking to more senior people, which is important and is something that we're going to discuss shortly, but it could be about networking with people in different teams at the same level as you, people in your team at a more junior level, but actually being open to the fact that you're going to achieve more if you get lots of different ideas, lots of different input, lots of different influences in, and other people are going to achieve more if you have input to help them as well.
Networking is definitely more about collaboration than it is manipulation, and so these are all good points, and working together at peers and below you in terms of the food chain of the organization are both really critical. And people often say, and I've done interviews where the newspaper reporter wanted to know, yeah, that's all good, but how do you network with that senior executive? What do you talk about that's meaningful? Let's say they don't even really know you very well, they know of you. So how do you have a conversation with that senior level executive that is at all meaningful?
First of all, if you put yourself in places that you can be, you should know something about the company, you should know something about the projects, and in this day and age, you should have a lot of information about the senior people. Follow them on Twitter, follow what they're LinkedIn, go check out, Google them or Bing them, whatever you want to do. So if they're working on something, sometimes they might be working on a project outside of the company, a pet charity. If you know something about them, you can allude to that they're the chairperson in their local community of, the fundraiser for the MS Society. You have to keep yourself informed. And sometimes the conversation, instead of having a very planned, detailed, I caught you in the elevator, now I'm going to smack you in the face with my introduction. You know what I call that? I call that the upchucking of an introduction. It's a very vivid image, but if you really can if you see someone in an elevator and you know they've done something, they've won an award or something happened in the company, and you just not even effusively just say, hey, that was, I know you guys are thinking about the upchucking, but if you just say, hey, that was great, I was really pleased, or I was very impressed, or I'm glad I got to read about it. If you think I'm going to wait till I can say this brilliant thing to them, don't wait. Say something, because otherwise the moment passes by. But you think that you're shy of talking to them. Let me tell you, and I know you all have talked to senior people, they're shy of talking to you. So make it easy for them. Say something. I don't care if you notice a tie or a scarf. Say something and open the door.
I think you get an excellent point, Susan. And the way I would add on that, I would actually 2 adjectives. Make it personal and make it relevant. For instance, if you really are into, I'm going to meet this very senior person, I want to leave a long-lasting impression, look at what's happening outside the organization, the world or whatever, and try to say, well, if I was in his shoe or her shoes, would I be interested in that? And then you create a connection, which is, oh, this person thinks on their feet. I'm going to give you an example. I was in the Baltic state last week, and I met with a person from the Lithuanian government. And, we were talking about the oil and gas industry, and he mentioned that as a country, they are really into developing their energetic independence by doing some import and working on LNG station and all that. It's all boring details. But then a couple of days later, I met someone from the oil and gas industry that I knew was on LNG, and I made a connection by telling him that. So he thought it was very relevant, and he thought, oh, this person, she took the time to try to give me a piece of information that will be useful for my business. And I know a couple of days later I got a thank you note and everything. So I create a connection which is relevant for them and make a difference for me. So this is what you should try to do anytime you meet the senior people.
Marianne, I really like those. I really like those 3: personal, or 2: personal, make it personal and relevant. And let me add a 3rd one to it that you kind of touched on as well, and that is to be helpful. It should be personal. If it's personal, you make that connection. It's got to be relevant, and if it in some way helps them when you're networking up, that's really important. And that's why, Susan, you mentioned to Google them. I think that's also very important. I'll give you a great example. I had an opportunity again to meet Richard Branson about 4 months ago. And so I wanted to see what was the latest, greatest thing that he was doing, and Google is a thing of beauty. You know, I found out some of his passions at the moment. One of them was the B team, this whole idea of the business team. And so when I saw him, I said, "How's the B team going?" And he told me a little bit about it, and I told him that I have a network of people. I asked him, would it be of any value if I promoted that for you on my blog? And he said, yeah, that would be great. I said, would you like to do a video? And he said, sure. So we actually knocked out a quick video. So win-win, because I get to do interview with Branson, and for him, it's promoting something that's near and dear to him. So making it helpful is, I think, a real important add-on to that.
And I think
I'm going to keep that. I'm going to keep that. I'm going to say personal, relevant, and helpful for the future.
There's something that sort of is a thread between what each of you has said, and that is, I think that it's very easy to put people who are in a more senior position than us, or if we're trying to do business with a corporate, someone who is in a brand that we admire as well, to put them on a pedestal and to start worshipping them. Now, I'm not saying to knock them down off that pedestal completely, but remember, they're a human being. They have the same nerves, the same reservations, the same concerns, the same confidence issues as many of us do. So, you know, I remember I was at a talk many years ago, and I just left the network that I was running, BRE, and I knew I was looking to work with corporates, and the speaker was the managing director of a very well-known clothes manufacturer in the UK. And after his talk, I went up and spoke to him, and I had a chat, and I said to him, at the time I was thinking about writing a book about networking in corporates, and I said, could I interview you for the book? And there was an instant swing in the dynamic. Then he was really interested in me. And we had a chat, we exchanged cards, he said, please get in touch. And I went back to my table. And a few minutes later, he walked past our table. And the woman next to me looked at him, and under her breath, she went, please talk to me, please talk to me, please talk to me. And I said, why are you saying that? She said, well, I'd love to talk to him, but he wouldn't want to talk to me. I said, why? She said, well, he's who he is. He wouldn't be interested in me. I said, do you think he's driven, I think it was about 200 miles, to go and give a talk and then stand on his own because every other business there is a small business and too small for him? I said, I wouldn't want to do that. I don't know about you. And she sort of swallowed and said, I guess you're right. And we left it at that. When I left, as I went out the door, he was in the corner huddled in a conversation. And he turned round to say goodbye and say, don't forget to get in touch. And I looked at who he was speaking to, and it was the woman who'd been sitting next to me who was too nervous to approach him. She put him on a pedestal. You have to not knock it away, but you have to recognize it's a human being the other side. And we have something to offer everyone around us, whether they are in a more senior position, in a bigger brand, or whether they are more junior to us. And I think it goes back to that point about collaboration. We've all got something to offer each other and being aware of that.
That's a great point, Andy. Let me just add one real quick thing, if I can, and that is that you don't want to do the opposite either. And sometimes I'll see people, oh, this is my one big chance to get the boss to do whatever. And you start asking for stuff.
Yeah.
People, when you're networking up, it's very common to complain or to ask. If you want to be known for the wrong reasons, complain to them, or ask for a favor. Instead, that helpful approach works much, much better. You get known, you get a little respect, and then later, when you have an issue, you're more likely to be heard. Susan, I cut you off.
No, you know what? It reminds me of something. I mean, I'm originally from Chicago, and that political thing. But when I moved here, I realized I always felt that you had to show up in places because if anything happened, you had to have someone, whether they were a supervisor or an alderman, who knew who you were so they would take your call and return your call. And I think it's the same way in our corporate. You've got to be visible, but you have to be the person that people can rely on and who won't come at them complaining. and offering something. It reminds me of the time I heard Tom Peters after his first book came out speak here at our chamber, and he literally stood alone in the corner. He was like famous, and nobody talked to him. So I went over to him and said, because actually I had seen him at another luncheon, and said, "Isn't that great? You're famous, and nobody wants to talk to you." Well, he started to laugh. It started a conversation. I know when you're 4'11", you get away with a lot of things. But the reality is, go over to people. We want to say to people, I've spoken to CEOs who are afraid to talk to you. Make it easy for them. Just go over to them. They're shy too. They're part of the 90% that are shy. So don't think you have nothing to offer. You have a lot to offer.
Susan, can I ask you something? So can I just ask you something that happened? A question I was asked a few years ago. I'd be interested in your take on it. I had given a talk to the Trainee Solicitors Society, so for students studying law plus first, second year lawyers or associates of law firms. And one of them later that week had been invited to attend a big regional function for the Law Society where she would be the only person at her level on a table full of senior partners from her firm. And she was petrified about it. She said, "How can I talk to them?" So while we've talked about the elevator conversation, I hate the term elevator pitch, or the quick chance to grab them, she's on the table the whole evening at a black tie affair with senior partners. She's junior in the firm, very junior. What would your advice have been?
Oh, take my Lanta before you go. That would be very unnerving. But the other thing is, these are people, they didn't get to be senior without a certain modicum of manners and grace. So just polite conversation and small talk. "Oh, it's so nice to see you here." Notice something about them. Be complimentary. You're sitting at a table. It's one of the things, and this is very tough when you're junior, if they are ignoring her, the people on either side will be much more open. I don't think that's easy to go across the table to start a conversation. But I'd like to say, too, I really think people that are very senior have a better grasp of manners. I think what she's doing is unnerving, but I would just say to her, talk to them. They've got children. They've got kids in school. They have people who live in neighborhoods you know of. I think it's where you start with little things. How long have you been in the country? Do you live in the neighborhood? Are you in the city? And bring yourself to that. You know, you might say something about where you grew up, where you went to school, what your parents were interested in. Just start the conversation so that they're comfortable with you. A lot of people say, what can you do to be comfortable with that older senior person? It's what can you do to make them comfortable with you? Because older senior people, they don't know what to say. And I don't know, I'm not a real corporate person, but I noticed that even as a teacher, we were supposed to be very cautious about talking to principals and superintendents. And there's a part of me going, they're people, just like what you said, Andy, they're just people.
Yeah. Marianne, sorry, I cut you off earlier.
No, that's okay. I'm going to move on to another point. I think, you know, what I'm hearing is like when you're a junior people and you have this, oh, I want to go and talk to a senior person. Think about it as it's all about self-confidence. You know, my grandfather used to say, the worst that can happen, this person is going to say 2 words and then walk away. And you feel ashamed or disappointed for 30 seconds and then you move on. So just do it anyway. And, you know, I met Tom Peters when I was writing the book because he was kind enough to endorse it. And I remember I went to Frankfurt to meet him because he was doing a talk there. And I remember when I got into the meeting room, although it was actually a bar, I felt so nervous to meet this legend in leadership, the guy that transformed McKinsey and everything. And literally, I say, "Hi, Marianne, it's so nice to be here and to meet you." And then we start talking small talk, which company you work for, GE, McKinsey, and all that. And we spent 3 hours talking together about everything. And at the end of the 3 hours, I felt like, you know, I was just talking to one of my peers. The whole age difference, the whole fame difference has completely disappeared. We were just 2 people having a conversation. right? But in the beginning, I was so scared and everything. But going through the motion help you as well build the self-confidence and start relating. And the more you talk to the people, the more you're going to find things in common, interesting viewpoint, and then anything is going to go away. It's going to be two people sharing a conversation.
Yeah, I've just had a very similar experience. I've just had lunch with W. Mitchell, who's one of the most successful motivational speakers in the world, and one of the most celebrated. And he's telling me stories about stories with Bill Clinton and stories with James Cameron and so forth. But it wasn't coming from a point of ego. It was coming from a conversation and where we were going from. And he didn't treat me as someone subordinate to him. He treated me as a peer. We hadn't met before. We're at the same conference. We've got friends in common who we happened to both be meeting for lunch and who introduced us. But he treated me as a peer. And I think that's an important thing to remember. Be respectful, but not in awe of people. And you'll find they relax. And I think the common thread is they're people like you, like me. And you either click or you don't. And that's nothing, unless they're highly arrogant. And there are people like that at all levels. And then I consider that their problem rather than your own, as long as you're not arrogant. Then if you click, you'll click, and they'll get on with you. And you find what you can talk about and what you do share in common.
There's something I talk about, and that is I tell people to drop names. I don't mean I had lunch with so-and-so, and I'm not saying that about you, but and W is one of the people I know, but I say to people, say that you had lunch with W. Find out who you know in common. People, once you find that thing or person in common, it becomes what you said, Andy, which is a conversation, and that's what life's about. You had that with them. I bet you have that with everyone you meet. It's a warm conversation. I mean, I've said, okay, Ivan, this is you. Oh, I stayed with Ivan and Beth Misner. I was dropping your name. But, it was really, I went on a jet, was it a jet boat or a jet ski thing on Big Bear. But it was like, oh my God, this was such an adventure. But the people that know BNI and know you, or the people that know boating and jet, it starts a conversation. And I think what you just did with W, who's just wonderful, is what we're saying to people. Just be in a conversation. I don't care if you're having the conversation about what kind of butter they serve with the rolls at this fancy dinner. You're talking to people, and you can always move from there to something more important to you. But start the conversation, even if it's about the food.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. Ivan, do you want to maybe move on to the next topic?
Yes, I'd love to. So next question I've got, we're going to go in a bit of a different direction. How important do you believe mentors are in an organization, and how do you find the right one for you?
Susan, we'll need to go to you on that because Marianne seems to have dropped off the call, so we'll need to go.
Okay. First of all, in Secrets of Savvy Networking, I thought about mentors as very important in a Socratic way, and I featured the late coach Bill Walsh as the Socratic mentor because he was a football coach of the 49ers because he trained and I guess you could say mentored and coached so many of the future coaches. But I came up with something I thought I would share is that you can't have one mentor for life. So what I wrote is you need moms. Mentors of the moments. These people that, like my mentor when I was a teacher, could not possibly help me as a speaker. But as a mentor, as a speaker, can't help me as an author. So if we think that there's going to be one person that opens up every door, that ain't happening. We need to broaden our concept of that. And not only do we need to be mentors for the moment or for the issue, but once we've been helped, and I know, Ivan, you write about this and talk about this all the time, we must turn around, reach down, and pull up the next person and help them as well. I think mentors are everything. They may not be for life, but they will make your life easier.
That's good advice. Thank you. Marianne, I don't know if you heard the question. What I asked was how important are mentors in an organization, and how do you find the right one for you?
Yeah, I was courtesy of Hong Kong networking and connectivity, I just had to drop out. It's interesting because I was listening to Susan. It's exactly what I was going to say. You don't have a mentor. You have the mentor that you need right now, because as an individual, you're changing, your life is changing, your career is changing, and again, it has to be relevant, helpful, and personal. I would say mentors are important, definitely, to help you. I don't want to really put it as in your career, but I think to help you as a person, whatever career you're going to choose to have. I would also say that how you find a mentor is a bit of an art, because I personally believe in chemistry in people. And, in all the big corporate environment, you have this mentoring program where they randomly assign you with people. And then you go and you have this first awkward meeting where, okay, this person is going to be your mentor. But at the end of the day, you don't know if you're going to like this person, if you're going to be able to build trust, if your personality are going to match. So I would say, you can go through this route and get the corporate machinery help you. But what is more important is find I call it, find your person. Call it, it's my person. It's the person that I look up to for experience, attributes, or because they embody somebody I would like to become. And then hang on to those persons. And you can find your mentors anywhere. I'm going to tell you a story. The last mentor I found it in the Eurostar. I was traveling from London to Paris. I was typing on my computer, and this gentleman, about 10 years older than me, 12 years older than me, was asked me if he could use my plug. And I said, yes, of course. And then we start talking about, it was a French person living in London just as I do. So we start talking about doing the commute. We start talking about France, and it was at the Hollande election time, so about the political system in France. Then we start talking about what we were doing. It was in oil and gas. I was in mining at the time. Then we start talking about Africa and all that. By the end of the journey, he gave me his card, and then he said, "Thank you so much for the conversation. The journey passed way quicker because it was very interesting." We met again in London, and 2 years down the line, he helped me on writing the book because he was on my advisory board, and now we're working together. I'm on the strategy of the different business. He's a really good mentor, and it started with a conversation in the Eurostar. So I was not looking for a mentor at this stage, but I just so happened to find one. So my advice is be open, look, observe, be curious, and be a bit out there. Talk to people. You never know.
You never know. And I would say, here's the other thing, what Marianne said, have your antenna up all the time. The person who you may think would be the mentor is someone that you find so repulsive, but that might be the person that you didn't think, that you lend them your adapter for a computer. And sometimes we need sometimes we need someone above us, sometimes we need a peer mentor, and sometimes we need a mentor that's in another organization that has the lowdown in our organization. But very often I find myself baffled by we're going to match you with the right person. I think of them as the Match.com of mentors. I don't know that it always works. But
I'd love to jump. Go ahead. Yeah, last I heard you say, Susan, you don't know if that always works, and I agree. At BNI, we do have a mentoring program, and we do match people together when we have to, but we generally ask the mentor if this particular person, if they feel they would be a good fit. So we have a conversation with the mentor first. And we've had mentors say, yeah, I don't think that would be a good fit. You know what, that person would be a better fit. And so we do the matchmaking of mentor and mentee with a little bit of input, generally speaking, from the mentor.
It's smart.
I think
at the end of the day, it's I look at it as a journey. Networking, mentoring, getting up in your career. First of all, it starts with you. What it is you want. Who are you? How can you position yourself? Then it's about getting in touch with different people, and so it's about, as we say, how do you make conversation, how do you network, and then eventually it evolves like in the wide array of people you're going to meet. There's one you're going to have a stronger connection with, a stronger chemistry with. And generally, this is how it happens, that this person become a mentor of sorts at some point.
I think that you've really struck a nail, particularly what Ivan said, but what each of you have said, that it is fluid, it changes, and sometimes it won't quite gel. And a lot of companies do have mentoring programs. If they don't have them formally through the company, then they may have them through the diversity networks, the women's networks, the LGBT network, whatever it may be. And I think that's really positive. But just because you share that interest doesn't mean that you'll click. And similarly, if you're an entrepreneur and you look for mentors, it doesn't mean that the first person you meet is going to be the ideal mentor. I've had 2 or 3 formal mentors, but what's really worked best for me is knowing that I'm surrounded by people that I can turn to for advice, for feedback, to be a sounding board on a range of different things at different times. So I have people that I call my mentors. They might not call themselves that. You know, I mentioned at the beginning that Marianne's in my mastermind group, and we had a phenomenal 2-hour session about 2 months ago.
That's your business.
But it was really sort of getting to the heart of my strategy for next year and really where we drive the business forward. Exactly what I'd expect from a mentor. But she volunteered the time as a friend. And another member of my mastermind group is doing the same with me in the new year. So it doesn't always have to be one person, and that's the same for me as a business owner as it is for someone in a corporate environment or a large organization. One of the things that I always advise is I think it's very healthy to have more than one mentor. I think it's healthy to have a mix of male and female mentors, so you get different strengths that men and women bring, and we'll be talking about that in another show coming very soon. It's helpful if you're working, say you work for a large bank, maybe find a mentor who's been successful in retail or been successful in travel or in a totally different field, but whose lessons might be relevant to what you're doing, might be applicable, might be transferable, but wouldn't be immediately obvious. Now, you could also have someone in banking as a mentor, so someone who knows what you're going through, has been through it. So you can look for different approaches and a different type of balance than just the one mentor within your organization that someone might assign to you.
I think, I think the term mentor is a bit tricky. I think the way I look at it is advisors, and then I make an analogy like when you're a company, you have a board, and when on your board, you have a board of advisors as well. So treat yourself as a business. I'm a business. Who could be my advisors, and develop different relationships inside, outside, cross-gender, cross-function, cross-industry to get almost a mini board for yourself that will help you throughout your career.
There's an excellent book exactly on that topic that I highly recommend called The Startup of You by Reid Hoffman.
Oh, I actually read that. Yeah, it's a great book.
It's a great book.
And the whole premise is treat yourself and your career as a business. Each individual as a business, and it's exactly what you're saying, Marianne.
Here's another.
I might make the connection, so thank you.
You said this, and I love what you said about it, but I'm going to add in, and GE started this years ago, and now it's in another companies, but I noticed in my life, I've been mentored by people much younger than I, where I am not ashamed to say to a 13-year-old, I need to have you help me figure out this iPhone, Snapchat, whatever that's totally right. So I think we need to embrace people older than us and people younger than us, because it's the people younger than us that know things that I absolutely don't know.
Hey, since we're talking about technology, I'd love to ask a question related to that. Now, again, we're doing an interview today on networking within your career, within a corporate setting. So the question is, relates to the use of social networks. Should you connect with your work colleagues on social networks like Facebook, LinkedIn? Is there value there? What do you think?
I have a friend who actually is a senior VP at a company that I worked for the last number of years, and what he told me is LinkedIn is for his business friends, but Facebook is for the people he doesn't work with. Luckily, I'm on his Facebook page. What I would say is if you connect with people that you work with, watch what you write and post. That's all I can say. I've even said this to, younger people. I mean, I may put out a lot about Stanford football games, but I don't put anything on there and this is what I said, that I wouldn't want to hear being said in a court of law, or would this pass the grandparent test? Would you want your grandparents to read this about you? So I think the same things. If you're going to invite people, it's okay. Don't put all that you would put, or maybe have a separate Facebook business page. But I think we have to be careful on what we post in corporate America, because there will be people that will take things and take them out of context. And I think we have to be careful. I think we should have as many friends as we like, but I'm going to be old-fashioned and retro. You can have 5,000 friends. If you don't have someone you can call when you break your leg and need to go to the hospital, you ain't got nobody.
Yeah. Hey, I got a comment on something that you wouldn't want to show up in a court of law. I literally had that happen. So
oh my gosh.
That is great advice. I had somebody in a business setting who posted something on Facebook, and we did a screen capture of it, and we literally used that in it didn't actually go to court, but in the process of the legal process, and that actually helped resolve the case before it ever went to court because of the slander that was done on Facebook. So be careful what you put on Facebook. It can show up in legal matters. Of course, I live in California, and it's the worst of all states, I think, for litigation.
I think that there is obviously the point you have to be very careful what you say. There's an infamous case in the UK where someone posted on Facebook criticizing her boss, saying how she hated her job, boss was a jerk, and so forth, forgetting that she'd actually added the boss as a friend on Facebook. And the response on her wall was, you don't enjoy it, don't bother coming in on Monday. So you have those stories, but equally, I meet a lot of people who won't add their business colleagues on LinkedIn, for example. Facebook, I understand a bit more, but they won't add the people they work with on LinkedIn. And I asked Phil Jones, who's the managing director of Brother UK, and who's very, very strong on social media, very strong for someone in a corporate environment. He's one of the best guys in the UK on this. And I asked, in an interview I did on YouTube, I asked him the question, would you recommend adding business colleagues on LinkedIn? And he just looked at me as if I was mad, and he said, why wouldn't you? He said, you never know where those connections will end up in the future. You never know where you'll meet people again. And you never know when they can help you. And LinkedIn, as an example, is a tremendous tool for finding connections and getting introductions. And if you hold people back because they're your work colleague, then you can't find out how they can help you, and they can't find out how you can help them to the same extent. So I find it unusual and don't quite understand the thinking behind that, other than people are worried that people at work will find out when they're looking for another job. And you just change the way you use LinkedIn so it doesn't become so apparent, because you're not just using it when you're hunting. Marianne, what's your experience of this?
First of all, I am not a very social media person. When you work in finance, you have all this confidentiality and everything. So I think it's to you. It's part of who you are as you're making your professional DNA making. I would tend to agree with Susan. Be careful what you write. I would also say I do separate my Facebook from my LinkedIn a lot. And one thing that I'd like to share with you, because it just happened 2 days ago. I reached out to a gentleman on LinkedIn, which was a contact of my contact, asking him, would you like to be part of my network? And the gentleman very nicely replied, listen, I only LinkedIn with people I've met, and I know a bit more. So what about I give you my email address, and let's talk, and maybe let's have a cup of coffee, and then I'll decide if I want you to be on my LinkedIn network or not. And I thought that was very interesting. And it reminded me of one thing, of one quote from Karajan: for every movement, there's a counter movement. And as much as we are fast connected, we global and everything, there's nothing like first meeting with a person to understand, do I really want this person on my network? Can I help this person? And can this person help me? And then that's how maybe you want to do it in terms of using as well the social media. So have your filter, your human filter.
Yeah, that's really very interesting.
Yeah.
And I gotta just jump in, Andy. Let's juxtaposition her comment with Thomas Power on our first show, where he was saying it's all about the number of people. And I felt I was 180 degrees off, right? And I was saying, no, it's not all about the numbers, it's about the quality. Now, Marianne's person took my position even way further and really limits it. So, I mean, I think it's interesting. If you haven't seen that show, go watch that show. And Thomas is adamant. It's all about the numbers. Just get a lot of people. You don't have to have any kind of relationship.
Oh,
one thing I'd like to add is we are not digital natives. So we see network, we see LinkedIn, Facebook with our perception and our filter coming from our experience. But if you talk to people who are 18 and 20, they don't make this difference. Everything is the same. It's very blurry. So, you know, we can be here and telling you how we would network, but if you're in your 20s, in your 18, chances are you naturally do it in the way which is relevant with your population. So don't adjust too much.
Well, here's the other thing I've learned is that a certain age range of people, they don't even go to Facebook. It's totally Instagram. They're the videos that they're watching. Here's how they learn. And I listened to the gentleman from Google Glass who has an 11-year-old, and I saw this with my 11-year-old granddaughter. She wanted to know how to use a yo-yo that I bought her and learn how to walk the dog. And she went to my computer, downloaded a YouTube video on how to do that little yo-yo trick, practiced, and I thought, in a million years, I would never have thought of that. So they think differently, and you're right, Marianne. They are digital natives, and some of the things that we think and filter. I personally on LinkedIn, they tell you don't accept someone you don't know at all. So I understand the gentleman who said let's meet face to face. But it goes to networking. Do you want to put your name over someone who you don't know how they work, you don't know their ethics, and yet they could say you're a second or third degree contact? And so I find that all very interesting, and I've been a big adopter of all of it. But my favorite of all is Twitter. And to me, I absolutely love Twitter. I got a happy birthday for being on Twitter for my 4th year, nothing my 5th year, very disappointing. But what is it? I have a brand new friend I met because she was retweeted by someone who I follow. We ended up meeting, and it's such a great story. So I think social media can be so important. But on LinkedIn, if you are going to invite someone, don't ever use their boilerplate invitation. Remind them how you met them so you personalize.
Good advice. Really good advice, Susan. Well, ladies, we're just about out of time. Do you have any closing thought before we wrap up? We got another minute or so.
Well, for me, I'm delighted to be with the three of you. It is such an honor for me to see my longtime friend Ivan, my new friend Andy, and really, honestly, Marianne, I think someone who I'm going to be connected to in the future for a long time. You're stuck with me. I've got Velcro in my vein.
Thank you. So, you know, send me an invitation in LinkedIn and I'll accept this one.
You got it.
Very nice.
No, I'd like to say one thing is, you know, whoever is going to listen to this show, it's all pointers and tips and advice, but you got to work, you got to find what works for you. And it all comes from within.
Excellent. Thank you. That's all we have time for in this edition of the Global Networking Show. Thanks to both Susan and to Marianne for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you both from me as well. We'll have another show for you in January. We're hoping to do one, as I mentioned earlier, on gender differences in networking, but we're just trying to check availability of one of our guests. So that'll be January or February, and we'll have more information soon on the show's website at globalnetworkingshow.com, on the show's Twitter Twitter account at Networking Show, and on our Facebook page as well. So please check all those. Send in your questions. Put your questions onto the YouTube video of this. Normally that's up by the next day. Because I'm traveling a lot, it may be a few days. So it may be next week before we're up and fully edited on YouTube. So please bear with us. But in the meantime, it still feels too early to say it, but I guess as we won't meet till next year, have a great Christmas, have a great New Year, and we look forward to seeing you in 2014 on the Global Networking Show. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.